Good morning, everybody. It's my great pleasure to stand before you to introduce the Honourable Carla Qualtrough. Carla Qualtrough has been, is the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion. Kind of perfect for us here today, huh? Carla is a successful lawyer, dedicated volunteer, and a Paralympic swimmer. And her commitment to addressing inequality and championing diversity makes her a strong voice in government. Carla was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Delta BC in 2015 and was re-elected in 2019. She has held the position of Minister of Sport and Persons with Disabilities, as well as the Minister of Public Services and Procurement and Accessibility. Today she serves as the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion. Before entering politics, Carla was a successful human rights lawyer who practiced at both the federal and provincial levels. She also chaired the Minister's Council on Employment and Accessibility in British Columbia and was an adjudicator with the Workers' Compensation Appeals Tribunal. Also, past president of the Canadian Paralympic Committee. Oh, speed it up. I know you really don't like these introductions. I've seen that from, well, I will tell you that, when I met with Minister Qualtrough a couple of years ago and talked about this idea of doing a strategy and that we really wanted to take the UN Convention on the Rights for Persons with Disabilities and make it into a strategy that could actually be something for Canada. She said, well, don't call it a national strategy then, call it a pan-Canadian strategy. So she has been very instrumental in our work right from the beginning, so it's my pleasure to introduce Carla.
First of all, thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you for your kind words, and thanks to CCRW for inviting me here today. Pretty much in my wheelhouse, I would say. As I begin, I too would like to acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici en tant que nouvelle ministre de l'Emploi, du Développement de la main-d'œuvre et de l'inclusion des personnes handicapées. It's a privilege to be surrounded by people who share my unwavering commitment to the rights of persons with disabilities and to celebrate yesterday, which was the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, together. This year, the theme was promoting the participation of persons with disabilities and their leadership, taking action on the 2030 Development Agenda. This year's theme is fully aligned with our government's goal to create a barrier-free Canada, where everyone has the same opportunities and chances to succeed. It's a goal we know that can only be achieved by everyone working together. I'm committed to build on the progress we've made over the past 4 years to work together, governments and organizations, to create a more accessible and inclusive Canada. Most of you know that I am a big fan of CCRW. Your work on the Pan-Canadian strategy is so important to identifying ways to improve labor market outcomes for persons with disabilities. And when I first got into this role, I'm going off script, someone's twitching in the back of the room, just so you know. When I first started talking to CCRW, maybe 4 years ago, and having just come from being 5 years at the BC Workers' Compensation Appeal Tribunal as a vice chair, it really dawned on me that there seemed to be this disconnect between that world, the world of workers' comp where I'd come from, and the world of disability rights where I had lived kind of prior to that. And I thought, what a strategically innovative way to get employers comfortable with disability. And we don't want to have to do that, and we shouldn't have to do that, but we do. If we could get, it could really be the gateway or the entryway to inclusion by sensitizing the employment community, by connecting for employers and businesses the relationship to what they're prepared to do for their employees and their workers who are injured, i.e. who came into their worlds without disability, but along the way acquired a disability, and what they seem to have in their minds blocking them for hiring somebody with a disability in the beginning. And I thought, you know, if we could get these worlds talking, there could really be some magic, because employers seem to go to bat for their workers who are injured. And I know the system isn't perfect, so I won't say it isn't without its faults. But there seems to be a higher level of comfort within employers' mindsets to finding ways to accommodate people who have become or acquired a disability along the way. So I think the work you're doing is really pivotal along the continuum of inclusion, because for me, I think that there's this entryway. But I also saw this disconnect between what we were talking about in disability rights movements and the really good work that was being done in employment law circles and rehabilitation circles. So I am beyond ecstatic that this has all come together through you. And I think it's a really good thing. I think that we're going to be able to talk about inclusion and disability and accommodations and adjustments and all that differently now because of the work you're doing. And I can't understate that. You know, we spend a lot of time in the human rights world talking about the duty to accommodate, as I know you guys do. And it really frustrated me when I was a human rights lawyer, because you always had to wait till somebody was discriminated against before the system kicked in to help them. Somebody had to be denied the job or denied the service or denied the housing or whatever it is people were constantly and are constantly being denied. And then this massive system would kick in. And years later, and a lot of dollars and tears later, somebody would be told, you're right, you shouldn't have been denied that job or that service. And yet that just felt hollow, because the job was gone or the housing was gone and you'd been through the ringer and you'd done this on your own because there was no real systemic way to address these big barriers. And then we as a community got together and created the Accessible Canada Act, the goal of which was to provide this systemic mechanism to address barriers in a bunch of areas, including employment, before they actually resulted in this kind of discrimination. And that's exactly what the Accessible Canada Act does. It puts in place CASDO, and I don't know if there are any CASDO board members here, but the Canadian Accessibility Development Standards Association, Standards Development, or anyway, something to do with standards. I created the name, I should know it, right? And sorry, it's like what? It's like 6 in the morning in BC, give me a break, okay? And the idea, right, that we would create these standards so that if there were systemic barriers, the system would take care of them. So my best example is the ATM for someone who can't see. So I, as someone who's legally blind, goes in, there's a barrier to my being able to interact with a bank, and I'm the one who has to file an individual complaint with the Human Rights Commission. I have to take it through the process, and at the end of the day, God willing, I'm told you're right, and that one branch of that one bank has to change their ATM. And then the next blind person has to do it for the next ATM. And so it went. Now, we're going to have a standard, a national standards for ATMs and banks. And if that standard is not being met, then the system will come in and demand change. So the onus won't be on one person or one organization. It won't be bank by bank, ATM by ATM. But it's really important, though, that with all of this happening, that there's harmonization, right? Because credit unions are provincial. So that standard won't apply to credit unions. So you have a bank next door to a credit union with different accessibility standards. So we're working really hard with provinces and territories to make sure as we move forward that the accessibility experience for the citizen is seamless. Nobody, except very few of us geeky constitutional lawyers, lives in the world of Section 91 and 92 of the Constitution like I do. And I can tell you, verbatim what these, because we live by it in government, right? This isn't your jurisdiction, this isn't my jurisdiction. But that's not how, like my mom, who's 76, doesn't walk in and say, oh, that's why the counter is a little higher here at the credit union, because there's a different standard than in the bank next door. It's just not how people experience life. All that to say, the biggest barrier that we face as citizens with disability is in the area of employment. And employment is my #1 priority. So you can imagine how excited I was when I got the call to come to Ottawa to talk to the Prime Minister about my new assignment. And he said, so we were thinking we'd put employment, which used to be with one minister, and workforce development, which used to be another minister, and disability inclusion, which used to be with you, together, and we're going to give it to you. Because all I hear about is how employment is the #1 barrier for 25% of our population. So I nearly lost my mind. Because it's, as you heard from my bio, it's kind of the culmination of everything I've been working on and everything I've been working with you guys on. So it's very exciting. And I know huge expectations, but, you know, I am committed to deliver. I'm committed to not having to, because in government, like in any job, it's about trade-offs and relationships. And, you know, if I wanted a national employment strategy, I'd have to go and I'd have to pitch the employment minister and say, I want within government an employment. I don't have to do that anymore, right? I talk to myself. And it's really exciting. But so, and I'll give you a little example. I'm in charge of Canada Summer Jobs, which is a program through which the government provides funding for 70,000 jobs in Canada for young people across the country. And I get to pick the national priorities for Canada Summer Jobs now. Guess what I'm going to pick? So that's not been officially announced, so I didn't really tell you guys anything yet. But just issue by issue, program by program, we're going to put a disability lens on our decision making. And we're going to do that across government. So during the election, we released, unfortunately not well publicized, because that tells you how much more work we have to do in the disability community, we created what we call a disability equality statement. No political party or government has ever done this. It's akin to a gender equality statement, where we committed to disability inclusion, which is a concept beyond accessibility, the idea that you just can't remove the barriers. You have to, from the start, include people. There will always be a world for accommodation because individual circumstances need to be taken into consideration. But as long as we let people and organizations and businesses get away with, and I say this purposely, the idea of saying, don't worry, we know we eventually have to get to you and sort out what you need, but in the meantime, we're going to do this. That is an inclusion. So we have to move beyond accommodation to inclusion and start thinking about everybody from the beginning. And we're always going to have to individualize, but that's true for everyone. You want to get the best and the most productivity out of your people. You're going to create the most individualized employment experience you can for them. That's just good business. And that's what we are committed to doing. So my mandate letter, all of our mandate letters are due to come out kind of, God willing, in the next couple of days. And what you'll see in there, I suspect, again, foreshadowing, is the operationalization of this idea of disability inclusion and equality. And you can see it in my title. When I first got elected, promoted, appointed, whatever it was, 4 years ago, I was the Minister of Canadians with Disabilities, which was a big deal. We'd never had any minister in Canada responsible sitting at the cabinet table for this. And then 2 years ago, my job switched and I was the Minister of Accessibility, which was really exciting because it took the focus away from somehow we had to fix people to now we have to fix the system. But it really focused on the barrier removal side of the system. And it was great because we were right in the middle of the Accessible Canada Act, and that made sense. But now I'm the Minister of Disability Inclusion, which is perfect for the message we want to send to the world, that we, as citizens with disabilities, have every right to be included from the very beginning. And we're going to talk about disability differently in Canada. And it's going to start in rooms like this, and it's going to happen all across the country. So that's my kind of marching orders to all of you. Come with me on this journey. Take advantage of my new job. Push me, challenge me, encourage me, you know, give me a break now and then, because this is a really tough job. But really help me, because there's some really tough nuts that we have to crack. And you don't know how long these gigs are going to last, particularly in a minority government. And we want to get as much done as we possibly can with the time we have. You know, we do have, with the process around the Accessible Canada Act, a great relationship across political parties. It was the only piece of government legislation in the last session over 4 years that received all-party consent, because everybody's ready, right? We were ready decades ago, but now Canada is ready, and we're going to take advantage of that. Excuse-moi, j'ai pas utilisé mon français de Vancouver depuis toute cette discussion, mais je vous assure que je suis très déterminée à utiliser cette opportunité pour améliorer les circonstances des personnes handicapées au Canada. Et je veux que vous me joindre dans ce voyage extraordinaire. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and we'll